Okay, welcome everybody. We are here with an assembled crew. Gus dropped out. Hopefully, he'll be back shortly. I'm joined by, of course, Xbox. Welcome, Xbox.
Hey, hey.
Hey, hey. Oi, oi, in fact. Headless Chicken. Cerberus Hex, the one and only, and Jefferson's just come in and has no idea what's going to be jumped, what he's going to be jumped with. But you will find out shortly, I assure you, Jefferson. Welcome. Welcome, Serb, and welcome, Headless.
Howdy.
Good. So, I mean, without further ado, really, I think I'm just going to pass it straight over. Joe in the crowd. Thank you, Gio, for your intro. That was great, everybody. That was an intro by Gio. Love it. And yeah, so thank you once again for joining us. And obviously, we will. I'll pass it now over to Xbox, and away we go. Xbox, what have we got for us this week?
Yeah, I think we were going to speak a little bit on moral theories and kind of, ethical systems. Morals usually deal with, in philosophy, with meta ethics and actions and intentions that ought to be done or right or ought not be done, be the wrong. There's a plethora of positions you can take. Just to name a couple, you can take a realist position, a non-realist position. Those are usually two that people decide between. I think Serb here had a position as well that he wanted to throw out there. You want to jump in there, Serb?
Oh, but did you just want me to start off? Just go? You want me to just...
Yeah, go.
Oh, okay. Well, I think as far like the correct moral theory, I'm not so sure if you could... I'm a non-realist. I don't think there's a moral out there you can go grab a hold of and show me. But I think if you study humans and human history and how humans act throughout history, you'll find that not only is it subjective, changes from place to place, time to time, people to people, what's considered moral is either pushed by an authority and then the smaller group accepts it, or it's accepted by a large group and then it's enforced on everyone else. So it's literally might makes right. The more might you have behind it, the more right it becomes. I think that's how everyone lives their life, even though they don't like that phrase.
Yeah, that's kind of our little subtitle under that, right? Do you live according to your beliefs? Do they line up? But in a system of might makes right, powerful pushing their agendas on you, what actually in that system makes it right? Like what makes it the ought?
It's the having enough power behind it. Someone who is considered a singular person that's considered powerful is not enough to do it. Right? There has to be enough people going along with it. Otherwise, what one person wants, no matter how rich or powerful they are said to be, it doesn't matter what they want if no one helps them enforce it. So it's always the group. It's always the the bigger group that's willing to commit force, violence, whatever, coercion. There's just all sorts of ways they can put it over a group. But as long as it's over that group for 1 or 2 generations, that's what people think's right. You grow up in it, you get used to it. That's it. That's why we burned witches at the stake. Everyone thought it was the good thing to do. And then enough people finally decided it wasn't a good thing to do, and now we think it's wrong. Even the Christians that, they read in the book, don't suffer a witch. They're not out there burning them anymore because they think it's wrong. It doesn't even matter if it's in their book. Enough of them think it's wrong, so it's now wrong.
Yeah, I mean, there might be other get-outs, right? Like, witches. There are no more witches because we burnt them all, for instance. Just saying. Might be a get-out.
Yeah, I mean, but we have literal Wiccans.
Right, okay, yeah.
Well, if you look at the view as, like I was saying, the right, which ought to be done, this would be more of a realist view, right? The right is what ought to be done, and evil or wrong is what ought not be done. And just the culture accepts this as the rule, right? I would agree with you. There's not a thing out there I can grab and call moral. Paint it red and put it in a jar or whatever. But there'd be a consensus of beliefs in these things naturally that happen to be right or wrong. As in, what's the example that Dillahunt used to, like drinking battery acid is always going to be wrong.
If it floats your boat.
Yeah, but I would disagree with him. If he, I'm going to use his own line against him. It's not just his line, but I've heard him say it a bunch of times. If he grew up in a society where it was considered morally good, if wished, to kill yourself, and battery acid was a reasonable way to do it, he wouldn't think it was wrong.
Right, but I'll push back on your system then. If the powerful are the ones in control, right, and their group of people decide that everyone else should drink battery acid, is that what everyone should do in society to do the right?
If they think you should drink battery acid, and they're powerful enough to enforce that on a larger group, or a group outside of themselves, like, expand their culture, for lack of a better word. Now, not everyone's going to agree right away, but over the course of a generation or two, it will become a thing. Right? It will be accepted, and then as long as some outside group doesn't outcompete that group, it's going to stay accepted.
Yeah, but okay. I think I'd rather go down the line of, well, no, I mean, what ought you do? Right? Is that not what morals are? Kind
of. I'm just saying all oughts are. I'm not saying emotions. Like, I'm not saying there isn't emotions or instinctual things that go into it. Right? Most people are afraid to die, so we'll see a large preponderance of death avoidance in most cultures. So there's some input like that in there, but it's on a vaguer, broader scale. Right. It doesn't get specific.
Right. So that raises the question, as Scott says, is suicide morally wrong?
Currently, it is.
Why?
Because the vast majority of people in any culture thinks it is.
Right. So,
go ahead, Jeff. And that's why you think we ought not do it, or you think that is why we ought not do it.
I think that's I think the concept we have behind ought is make believe. I think the closest you can ever get to an ought is what I'm describing.
Is the might makes right kind of category.
Yeah.
Okay, let's just hand it over to Jeff for a little while. Jeff, did you want to add something there?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, like, I think it's interesting because for with the thing on suicide, if you talk to like a lot of Christians, their reaction to suicide will be, well, if someone committed suicide, it was an act of self-absorbed and selfishness. It's this incredibly selfish thing to do. But that opinion might not resonate if you go to someplace like Japan, where they can make an argument where committing suicide was the selfless thing to do under certain circumstances. So, and I think in those cases you can make a moral argument for suicide. You probably couldn't make a moral one in kind of conservative Christian culture, but outside of that, you might be able to. So, and also as far as like the idea of like, I don't know that you necessarily have to have. I don't know that you have to have a group strong enough to enforce a set. I mean, that would obviously be helpful, but in some cases, I think sometimes that stuff is just negotiated culturally and becomes kind of a trend. So it's less of an imposition from a group onto others and more of a style people have selected.
Oh, well, yeah, I would agree. It's not always force, right? That's why I said that there's other things, and I listed like coercion and stuff. But if just the majority of people think something in a localized group over the course of 1 or 2 generations, the predominant thinking on whatever subject we're talking on will be adopted by future generations, and it will tend to snowball one direction.
Yeah.
Welcome, Mr. Mounte.
Hey, Chris.
Good evening.
I'll be back in a minute.
And obviously, there's always the subjective objective dichotomy. I'm kind of trying to push that aside for a minute because we're all kind of talking in subjective generalities here, or subjective systems.
Yeah.
Right.
Your comment, Christopher. Would you like to just expound upon that for us? Obviously, I think that was what Serb is saying, but it needs repeating, I think.
Yeah, in listening to Serb talk, he was talking about oughts, and I kind of came in a little late to the discussion. I didn't realize it was tethered to morality, and it might not be. I mean, I'm just trying to pick things up as we go here. But yeah, as far as what you ought to do, well, that depends on what your goals are, both short-term and long-term. And what are your goals? Well, they're based on what you value, right? And what you value is based on cultural norms. And that's why moral systems, I mean, from a psychological perspective, we see what's the word I'm looking for? Moral relativism, thank you, something like that, right? Where each culture, depending on its norms, values different things, where people have different goals to achieve those valuable things, and therefore what they ought to do changes from culture to culture. I mean, you can just look at something as basic as dining table etiquette to point this out. What should you do? What is rude? What is a sign of respect? Like changes from culture to culture based on what they value, how they interpret things, and what their goals are.
Yeah. And I would say the way you worded it in that comment was, and how you said it here is perfect. I think when we say ethics, we're talking about oughts in the sense of goals, like you put it. But we're pretending there's something else. They really are just goals.
Yeah.
I
liked it. I would leave it there. Trying to push it beyond that, I think, is a heavy load, a heavy burden. It's a heavy burden.
Yeah. To catch you up, we were just trying to discuss different moral systems. Which one's way out better? Which one's fare better?
And that's what the conversation in ethics is really about. It's But you have the people that pick particular sides, particular forms of ethics to argue. They believe those usually, but what they're arguing is that we should essentially adopt this because it's better than either what we're doing or what we could do. So they're
Yeah, but
they're
aren't they the worst people to listen to? Because there's a study that
Usually.
shows that moral philosophers show the least ethical, not the least ethical behavior, but of the markers that show a high moral and ethical compass, like donations to charities and blah 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 blah. They score like lowest on all of those metrics, so they're not even following what the fuck they believe. So why should we listen to those assholes?
Yeah, they have higher rates of psychopathy too.
Yeah,
I love that.
That was actually our subtitle. Was do you follow what you believe?
That I mean, that's kind of what that's what psychopaths do. They try to learn the system they're in, and they have to systematize it. That's why there's so many of them in ethics. So they're trying to make a system out of something that's like, like mentally kind of gray and gooey and not really, not necessarily factual.
What about the idea that different systems of ethics work at different times in history, like different times in place, right? Like taking the ideas of ethical systems and using them as modules, and recognizing that throughout history the modules need to be swapped out because of the changing technology, society, etc.
Yeah, I think we see
I just
that
made
a lot.
that up. I don't know if that's
that's
I can't
actually
be the first person who thought of it, but I mean,
that's actually a whole topic that's discussed. Like it's pretty in literature. It's pretty well acknowledged that we couldn't. I don't know how I want to put it. The sort of like Bronze Age totalitarian dictator king, god king, wouldn't work currently, right? The ability for people to
I'm going to push back. I think that it could work for a short period of time if it was a benevolent dictator.
Oh yeah, okay, but what I mean is over the course of like a generation, it wouldn't work longer than like a generation.
No, I wouldn't even think it would last that long, but
yeah,
depending on what was accomplished, it might not need to.
Yeah, because the way the technology is, it is so easy for people to exercise their power out of the view of that.
Well, of course, we're humans.
Where back in the day, the wheels knew. People had to walk everywhere. We just don't live in that world anymore. That's why you have when you have dictatorships currently that are close to that, like North Korea, they have to practice technology limiting. They have to take that stuff away from people, because if the people have that, they won't be able to enforce the rules they want.
Oh yeah,
and that's why they're so afraid of a free press.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Not to bring it to current politics.
It's a good point. I think we should acknowledge certain like political philosophies as kind of analogous to technology. Like in a world where non-liberals are making liberal arguments to make changes, in that environment, it's really, really hard to push anything but being liberal.
Well, you have in-group and out-group fighting, right?
Yeah, but it almost sounds like
kind of crop up.
It almost sounds like you're talking about a technology fight as if it's the social tit for tat game theory. Let me rephrase that. The way that I heard you talk about politics seemed like the tit for tat kind of perpetually evolving, as in the same way that technology advances.
Yeah, like I think we should consider something like the idea of human rights as a kind of technology. I mean, it's not technically technology because it's not things you can pick up and hold and build and stuff. But we do kind of sort of build philosophies like that. So like a pseudo technology. I don't know of a good word for it.
Like a social technology.
Yeah. Almost. So like Yeah, yeah. In a world where, or in an environment where basically everyone has accepted human rights as a thing, you're going to have to make arguments with those to move away from those. Right? So it works against moving away from itself.
Mm. Well, I mean, unless you built the structure that human rights is a concept that's meant to evolve and be recalibrated, right? Like, what do human rights mean before the internet versus after it? And then when it first started versus when like everybody started figuring out fucking dastardly ways of using it.
But again, it tends to only. I mean, it does evolve. It does that concept does evolve, but it really, because it's been accepted so broadly, it causes so much friction that it really only evolves with other technology. You're not going to go around making ethical arguments without any change in environment and be successful against something like that.
Welcome to Scott.
Well,
One of my
thank you. I've
favourite
never been on a Simos Funk stream before, so this is an international honor.
Well, it's mine. It's all mine. All mine, I assure you. Thank you so much for joining us, Scott.
Well, thanks. I was going to ask, can anybody hear like a fan roaring in the background? I've got one going because it got up to like 95 today, and it's hot in the house.
Other than me, because I'm a fan.
Yeah, I'm a fan of Simos's, and I'll roar in the background.
All right. Well, as long as it's
I'll be back in a minute.
And not my fan that you're hearing, then we're good.
No, you're good. You're good.
I don't know that I have much more to say than what I've already said in the side chat. It's just that whenever these morality talks come up, I'm always a good 6 or 7 hours too late. So I thought I'd just jump in here and listen along until I blurt something out.
Well, hell, I thought I would have got more pushback because usually people are like, they'll push or argue for some type of utilitarianism or something. And then I'm in here going, no, might makes right. That's what it is. And then everyone disagrees with me, but everyone's agreeing with me.
It's like getting a rock for Christmas, but they wrap it really pretty.
Yeah.
It's power. And behind that power, or maybe the tool behind that power, or the power behind the tool, is cultural conditioning, propaganda, sincere belief by the majority of the people, by the consensus. And if there are different moral beliefs about different particulars, then they're far enough apart not to disrupt the whole society. Or they've found a way to let those differences exist in the society without tearing it apart. And so there's a lot going on with the idea that it's might makes right. Just like there are ways to keep entropy from running out of a system too fast before you can take and utilize that energy, and that path to morality for everybody is the societal feedback, whatever police or institutional shoring up needs to be done, like the church or something that maybe stands in its place. And ultimately, when it has to do with one person morally trespassing on another person, you have the police and the courts and neighborhoods running people out of town, that kind of thing. So I don't know, it gets complicated. But if y'all want to ask me questions about what I think, fine. If not, I will hold my tongue and let other people ramble on.
Well, we appreciate you being on the panel. We all ramble, so just jump in when you can. If you're waiting for somebody to stop talking to start talking, you'll be here forever, brother. So just chime on in.
All right.
I'd like to chime in because the way you guys were talking about might makes right. It immediately brought to mind the political theory of anarchy. being.
Yeah.
Like that is that is like the reflexive argument against an anarchic system where nobody has established authority over anyone else. It's like, yeah, that works until some really strong fucking mean dude decides he wants his way.
Yeah, and as soon as enough people make or agree to that way, or agree with him and help him make it that way, it's
Well,
all
yeah,
gone.
especially if he's charming. Oh, God forbid.
Yeah.
To other powerful people.
Yeah, but think about that. That person then essentially builds a culture. He builds a new little society. And let me go farther down the rabbit hole to see if I can get anyone to disagree with me. I think if might makes right is not how morality functioned, we would not be able to have a society.
I don't know how much pushback I directly have, but I
Do you
think
mean
that
as a leavening agent, as a way of like every once in a while kind of keeping things in order, or as a consistent variable?
Yeah,
there you go.
basically morality would set up the rules, and then eventually in human history that gets codified into laws, right? So you have essentially the game that everyone knows and most people agree with, and that allows you to negotiate relationships with strangers, and that allows you to build something bigger than a family.
Okay. Yeah, but don't they just start dominating, and then doesn't that just take over society?
It can, yeah. That's you have groups competing,
Yeah.
and then once
And then
another group gets
anarchy's
into
over.
power,
And then hierarchies are established all over again.
Yeah.
I'm just really quick. I want to get this in because I hate anarchy. Or anarchic theory, I should say. And I don't really hate it. I'm being dramatic on purpose. But to me, anarchy, as well as like libertarianism, when they try to point to times in history when it has worked, to me, it's like transcendental meditation was popular in the 70s because they used to have pictures of people floating in the air saying, this is what transcendental meditation can do. Like one of them being Doug Henning. And the pictures were believable to idiots until you realize that these are people that are sitting in lotus position and hopping in the air, having a picture taken while they're in the air and then landing. To me, while you're in the air, those photos of being in the air, that's what anarchy is. It is what happens between solid foundations. If you were to take a picture of it, because it only lasts a split goddamn second.
Yeah. You have a power vacuum where a bizarro kind of hippie takes hold for a little while, and
Hello, someone mentioned my name.
Filthy hippie.
And then some culture next to it absorbs it, or someone inside of it says, "Okay, enough of this,"
and then we all get together and vote for Tom Petty for mayor.
He's dead.
That didn't stop them the last time.
Yeah, but then we could end up with a Mad Max system, right? Like to just perpetual Mad Max going on.
Yeah, I mean that's like early. That's like not the earliest of human history, but close to it. That's where you have a bunch of warlords roaming around. Some of them might be settled or not settled, but they're all that's what it is. It's Mad Max.
If only we
400
had
BC is Mad Max.
If we only had digital video coverage of the moral development of early societies, that would be so great.
Well, we have a lot of it.
Yeah, well, it certainly do. Yeah, things change, morals change. I think Cerberus gave a great example earlier, if I can remember what it was about. I guess slavery, but that is one where now it's, even though it still goes on. In places, it's considered bad. It's considered something you ought not to do, is to enslave people and make them work without giving them, control over their lives or whatever. And so things are going to change. I'm sure things are going to change. By the time my life is over, I'll be harumphing at different things these young idiots are doing. That's considered okay. But I know that if my grandpa had lived to see gay marriage, he would have died that year. So he died in '83, I think, of complications of lupus, but if he had lived, when did they do the gay marriage? That was during the Obama administration, right? Yeah, if he had lived that long, he just hearing the news would have killed him because that would have been so outrageous to him.
But slavery is a really good example of this because it's recent history, and even while America was fighting the Civil War, or even after America fought the Civil War and the British outlawed slavery, the West African slave trade in West Africa was still considered completely moral. And the only reason why it stopped is because the British decided to be a giant pain in the ass. The British sent ships to West Africa and just started, basically robbing and killing slave traders until it wasn't feasible anymore.
Yeah. Looks like Randy is wanting somebody kicked.
Yeah, I think he's preferring to go. I think. Anyway, look. I would just. I mean, yes, these are very clear examples, but of course, morality is important in the grey areas, right? Because that's where that's where it becomes like I don't know, more. That's where the answers that it may give us count. Right. I mean, it's on the extremes. Yeah, we all know that murder is immoral, defined that way. So there we go, kind of thing. But what I would say is, and what I'd like the panel to talk about, and this comes from something. Is it much? No, that's not that one. It's not that one. I can't remember the one, but it's there somewhere. Which is things like cancel culture. Right? Because it seems to me that there is some kind of. Thank you, Christopher, as well, by the way, for doing this. It seems to me that there is something in this which is to do with morals, and yet identity politics gets mixed up or brought into it as if that is the answer that people are looking for. But I don't believe it is. So, is cancel culture immoral by its
Oh,
nature,
you mean
or
like the moral outrage that you see?
yeah, exactly,
and virtual signaling and things like
exactly the
that.
topics. Yeah.
I think it's an expression of a dangerous kind of moral reaction, and that is just the gut reaction of shaming or shame. It's shaming of rightly here I go again, rightly or wrongly, it's shaming. It's an emotional reaction, whereas it doesn't ask all of the edge case kind of issues, whereas maybe somebody who's more stoic would before they react would sit back and try to turn the issue over in their head and realize, well, the strategy of canceling, what does that really accomplish for the ones who get canceled? They might read I can't remember the book. I think it was by Malcolm Gladwell, about that lady that she said something, she said something that was outrageous on a plane, or just before she got on a plane. She got on a plane, and by the time she got to her destination and looked at her Twitter, she'd been fired from her job, and because she got canceled. Now, what's the morality of that too? So anyway, I'm just saying that it's a
story in
bad overreaction based on immediately judging things based on your emotion solely. I'm done.
I don't know. I think if we were taking Serb's kind of guide, that morality is sort of centered on a might makes right kind of principle, roughly speaking, then cancel culture would be morally good, depending on how it was applied. Because if you had somebody, say, present a moral system such as, well, hey, you guys, you liberals out there, you believe in free speech and letting everybody have their say. Let me have my say. And the first thing I'd like to contribute is that if I were in charge, none of you would get your say. You know, if you have a system that's imposing kind of morality top down, that person ends up getting canceled because they're basically proffering a competitive morality that would upend the one that's in place. So the idea of cancel culture, I think, is just, cancel culture has always been around. People have always had to take it on the chin if they've said something or done something that inflames or offends people. It's just now that people are interconnected with more technology, it happens much faster, and it sometimes happens out of context. But and oftentimes it's out of sync too, because there are examples of people getting just like ratioed to hell and back on things like Twitter, and then it has consequences of their job, and what they did online was taken out of context. I think the interesting thing about the cancel culture debate is to hear people decry it, but then at the same time use it.
Yeah, well, that's what it is. It's not. I would say canceling is amoral. Just even from any perspective, it's the reason behind trying to do it that makes it moral or immoral, depending on what group you're in.
Real quick, this I don't know if it's the same story, but I couldn't find the Malcolm Gladwell story, but John Ronson published a story in the Times about what you're talking about. Somebody posted a tweet and blah blah blah. I posted that link in the side chat if anybody wanted to check it out.
And that link will be in description as well for those that are future watchers.
Now, what did John Ronson write? I cannot recall.
Is he the one who followed Alex Jones? John Ronson.
Oh,
I think I have an audio book by him. He does weird stories, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. I think it came from Ronson, and I don't think Gladwell. He might have written about it in a chapter in one of his books, but I think it was Ronson who wrote about it mostly.
Oh yeah, he wrote the psychopath test. He followed.
Oh, okay. That was a very
Alex
popular topic for a while.
Yeah. Interesting author, nonetheless. Regardless, cancel culture. Here we go.
Yeah.
Sorry, back on track.
And I would say with the canceling, the red pill stuff, the men's rights stuff, the feminist stuff, like all that sort of thing going on with I shouldn't say normies. It's more normies now than it was before, but on the internet and in society, that is two groups that have a different set of morality trying to dominate each other.
Yeah, agreed. They have a different they have a different moral outlook.
Yeah, they're trying to each impose their set of morality or ethics on the other one.
Well, they're trying to shape the general morality, right? So the way that you framed it seems combative, right? So for the people who are conservative about the way that the current moral system exists, and what the fuck does that mean? So the placeholder will be the people who believe in traditional family values, right? Some shit like that. Where was I going with that? That only. Fuck! I remember. What did you just say? Why did I bring up the?
I was saying you had the two groups that were trying to dominate and impose their moral set on each other.
For the people who are stuck in the traditional way, any changes like you're imposing this shit on me. Why don't we just keep the status quo? Whereas in reality, when you take a step back, it's like there's always a churning and changing of the moral code by people who push. Sometimes they push too far, and then it kind of refracts back and goes away, or it's just a lesser version of the extreme version of it. Like the Me Too movement, some people would say, is an example of that. When it was full blown, it was absolutely everywhere. And now it's kind of talked about, and the consequences of it are, what it is, because Louis C.K. is still fucking doing stand-up. And so they, of course, different factions are trying to mold the general morality. But even that is like some cockamamie bullshit where it's like, okay, well, I realize that everybody deserves respect, but when you think that you deserve more respect than I'm giving you, and I think I'm giving you the appropriate amount of respect because it's what everybody wants, what do we do at that distance between what you want and what you're getting, considering that there's an argument for you're getting what everyone else gets? Do you think that cancel actions by groups lacks accountability? I don't know if I understand the question, but I'm going to assume like cancellation by groups prevents any one person who can be blamed unless there's a leader of that group. Is that what you're talking about, Mark? And otherwise, feel free to come on in. We got the link posted.
I think he's saying if like a common one they could put forth is a woman claims someone raped her, and tries, instead of going to court, gets the public involved, and now this guy's canceled. But then it turns out he didn't do it, and then nothing happens to her. Is that like that accountability? Is there lacking of accountability in that sense? Or is anyone being held accountable for doing it without any restraint, essentially, even when it's false?
I don't have much time. Sorry. So Mark typed yup while you were talking, and because of the latency, I can't tell whether he's saying yup to my framing of it or to yours.
I think that was yup to you, Crystal.
All right, so just for the sake of conversation, Mark says he doesn't have a lot of time. I'll assume I interpreted him correctly. Yes, sir, but I always see it as a problem. So now I'm totally confused. But we're going to pretend that I interpreted Mark correctly so I can get my answer in before he leaves. So cancel actions. So if I'm understanding that correctly, yes, I think that it is a form of kicking up dust so that nobody can point. It's like having shell companies, right? Is the social equivalent to economically having shell companies, because they're a way to, build a cloud of dust that prevents accountability and fingers being pointed at any individual. And I think it's the same thing as, anonymous cancellations on Twitter and online and stuff like that. People are super bold when they're anonymous and not held accountable, and they're super cowardly when their names are associated to the public opinions that are posted.
Yeah, we were running a live stream yesterday on Answers in Atheism, and there's this one person, I can't remember his name, the freak, who was just being really rude to Speed or somebody, and he actually admitted, he said, I'm not normally like this in person. It's just when I'm online. Which is the whole point. Why are you being so nasty online and kicking up dust like this? Why not be cordial and civil?
Probably because you're an atheist.
Bump, bump, bump.
Just putting it out there.
You're singing my song. Good faith conversations. Come on.
I so wanted to burst into some Ronnie James Dio just then.
What do you think about ethical systems based on your preferences?
I'm all about them. I prefer those ones.
I think that's sort of what I'm saying. I'm saying it is. It's just a negotiation of people's preferences on a mass scale.
Yeah.
Right, so getting people with the same preferences, and if not, trying to persuade them to your preferences.
Yeah,
that's okay.
But on the mass scale, it's not really. If there's ways to do it this way, like through social media, fine. But there's actually I don't know, not negotiation as in two people on at a desk or at a table talking with one another, trying to get both sides to come to an agreement. It happens, but in a in a much more indirect process through various means, and perhaps not even being aware that a negotiation is taking place.
Or direct means, like celebrating Memorial Day and having parades on the 4th of July. And I mean, come on. Political systems are a way of getting a society shaped
Yeah.
in a certain mold and keeping it that way.
By the way, in terms of molding attitudes, moral and otherwise, I've been listening to an Audible book by a lady named Orantes. Let me pull up the audio book that talks a lot about that, kind of in a negative way, but it doesn't have to be. Naomi Oreskes, Naomi Oreskes, The Big Myth, How American Business Taught Us to Loathe Government and Love the Free Market.
Yeah, that I saw an interview with her. That I haven't read that book yet. That looks interesting.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff, and even like the stories of Laura Ingalls Wilder in from Little House on the Prairie fame were actually fashioned by her daughter, who was a big wig libertarian of early years, and shaped those stories to invent a kind of pioneer American attitude for the 20th century, rather than telling the story how it happened historically, which is a fascinating piece. So there are so many things that go into shaping our attitudes, moral and political and economic and otherwise, that it's both infuriating and fascinating at the same time.
Well, does anyone here think that we need a objective moral guide to have morals? Or would anyone here could make that case?
Kind of. Okay.
It sure would be easier.
Yeah, kind of. So it depends what you mean by objective moral guide.
Yeah.
That's the issue with that, right? So I think there is an objective grounding to morals, which is based in evolution, but that doesn't give you the full panoply of moral behavior. That doesn't give you your oughts still. Right?
Well, by an objective moral guide, we would have to define what that would be. Is it a way to guarantee that you're doing the right moral thing 99.999% of the time? How would you express success in developing and using a moral guide, an objective moral guide?
Just a mind independent standard that you would look to for the rules of the oughts and the ought nots.
Mm-hmm. If you're going to say morals are real, that's the only way in which to have morals being real. A mind-independent thing.
Well, this is querying the pitch for me. So when I say, I think there is an objective standard or grounding, it's not a standard, it's a grounding to morality, which is based in evolution. Of course, I'm referring to chemicals because I'm a materialist in that sense. And I don't think there's anything controversial. I don't think it's too controversial to say that. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we have a standard by which we can say X is always objectively right and wrong. And so when I say it's queering the pitch, I think it's queering the pitch because when we take when we listen to people who believe in divinity, for instance, give objectives, that is what they're talking about, that there is a standard outside of humankind, namely God, that dictates what is good. Right. So I think that's very, very specific. And when we try and play up to that, I think we're wrong to do that. All right. So to claim it personally, again, this is my personal opinion. Right.
So you're saying queering the pitch?
Oh, that's a cricket term, yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. So
well, no, that's fine. It's just like I'm looking for a UK to English translator.
Beg your pardon. Yeah. So when somebody when the bowler or the bowling team quiz the pitch, what they're doing is putting little bumps in the bowling surface, so the ball will jump one way or the other.
Gotcha.
Right? So it makes it
Is
harder
that English
It's like
bowling
loaded
or
dice.
American bowling?
No, cricket's bowling, so it's Australian as well, obviously.
I guess I would say loaded dice
Indian.
or just fucking
Yeah.
things up.
Yeah, just making it so it's more difficult necessarily.
Oh, are we allowed to curse here?
Making it so the game's impossible, shall we say?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Irregular bounce. There you go. Gives an irregular bounce. Thank you. Yeah. So anyway, that's sorry to curving the baseball. Okay, if that's illegal, then yeah.
Corking
Oh,
the
welcome.
bat, putting cork in the bat.
It's
yeah.
Wind Productions. I'd love you to come in if you can. Wind Productions. There should be a link at the top. Be amazing
Yeah.
to hear from you.
One ought to curve the baseball. That's an objective moral fact.
Yeah, I mean that's the same. So I mean, again, if Wind Productions comes in, that would be really great because that we're right at the point where he could. Oh, there we go. John Fisher's here. Okay, excellent. Welcome to the stream, John Fisher. Really nice to have you on here. I'll wait for you to get your mic together and stuff. So yes, I think there may be different types of morality that we're talking about here.
Yeah, I think morality is grounded in evolution. I think.
Go ahead, John.
Did I say illusion? No. Grounding. The objective grounding for morality rests in evolution, but I think that an objective guide for morality or an objective morality is a kind of a word salad ultimately, because you're never going to be able to treat anything as an objective guide. That's just another way of gaining power over others, is by saying this is objective. When how are you going to establish it that it's objective or authoritatively objective? We can all say it's mind independent. Like even the Bible is mind independent. The 10 Commandments is mind independent, but only when that is used as an argument, only when an argument is used that it's authoritative over us somehow, does it really become some sort of issue. And it's always going to boil down to the power to make people act and believe that quote unquote objective guide is the one you should follow. So it's always down to power.
Indeed.
Well, I'm wondering if did you need to say
before
something?
Before you go,
John?
Xbox. Yeah. Sorry, before you go, I just want to get John. Is your mic working now? Can you say something for us?
Are we all using Chrome?
We cannot hear you if you are speaking.
Yeah.
Who?
John Fisher.
Can he? Let's see if he can do.
There's no icon.
Private chat.
I realise that's not always an issue, but maybe you would need to set your mic and then rejoin. Maybe stream.
I don't see a private chat from him, so he may not be able to communicate at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right, and we got Beamsy as well. Hello, Beamsy.
Beamsy.
Hey, Simos.
Hey, good to see you on here. Thank you so much for joining us. And I don't want any of that naughty talk, okay?
Aww.
Don't be a naughty boy.
Okay, I give in.
Well, first you had my attention, now you've got my erection.
Yes, okay. Did you have something that you wanted to add at this point, Beamsy, or are you joining for the conversation?
He wants to spank everybody.
Well, other way around, but we won't go there.
Okay.
When it comes down to morality, I come from the aspect that there is no overall morality of it, because through personal experience, I lost most of my memory when I went through a little incident 17 years ago, so I've had to make all the choices myself. I realize that our brains work in such a way that we actually make all our own decisions consciously and subconsciously, and where it actually comes from, I have no idea, but it's very subjective towards an individual. That is why you get in some places that stoning gay people is the right thing to do, whereas in other places that's morally wrong.
Okay, you're back on Xbox.
Okay, I didn't know if anybody wanted to respond to him. I was wanting to respond to Serve and with his view.
Go ahead.
If why ought someone pick might makes right?
Why ought someone pick might makes right?
Yeah,
You don't have
as
to
their
pick
moral system.
Damn, Cerebus, for good or for ill, I'm agreeing with you a lot tonight.
Yeah, no one has to pick, and it's not really.
Yeah, it's just
It's
the
not-
way it is.
Yeah, it's not really the moral system. It's how you get moral systems. More like.
Yeah, it's how
Using
they
the might.
go about.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so,
but
what's your
like I said,
argument
it's not just force. Like it always involves some sort of might, some
So
sort
what's
of
your
power.
argument for that? What's your argument for that ought to be the way it is? That might makes right ought to be the way it is.
Oh, there is not. I'm not saying it ought to be that way.
Yeah, I would say, if I may interject,
Okay, you're just describing.
that
Yeah.
we don't say that gravity ought to be, 32 miles per second, on the surface of the Earth or whatever in Earth's field, whatever the actual measurement is, it just is. That's how come we have rocks, on the surface of the Earth and things like that. Is gravity. Moral systems among our species of primate arrive that way. There's no ought to it. And you're never going to find a real ought to it that's not some sort of verbal illusion.
Yeah, I think there's only two kinds of oughts really. There's if there is actual morality, like a moral somewhere you could go grab and say, hey, look, here's a mind independent thing. Don't kick your dog. That's what it is. This is a physical example of don't kick your dog. You can have an ought then, right? Because you can point it and go, there it is. Or an ought can reference to a goal, sort of what Maudie brought up when he came in.
Instrumental,
if you're saying if you adopt a ethical theory of like utilitarianism, you have a goal, and then from that goal you can argue or not. But if all I'm describing is how people come to believe things are moral.
Yeah, that sense of ought is a conditioned reality inside of each human brain. You ought not to do that. You ought to do that. We've been conditioned for that by mommy, siblings, school teachers, principals, pastors, deacons, Sunday school teachers. All of them have contributed to that deep-seated feeling of oughtness. And sometimes that sense of ought is strong, and we don't perceive it as negotiable. And there's other issues in which it's a little bit weak for whatever reason. We can negotiate this without feeling like we're collapsing on a whole system. The enterprise of moral philosophy, thinking that you can construct a morality and get everyone to follow it. Well, actually, philosophy doesn't even care if you follow it or not, I don't think. But it's kind of I think in the end, it's all going to turn out to be a verbal illusion. It's good to use to analyze and study the nature of morality, but thinking that you personally adopt a morality based on a moral philosophy, you can use it to affect your moral reasoning, but it's not going to totally overturn stuff, that you've been reinforcing since you were just out of the womb.
So are you arguing you can get an is from an ought?
No, I'm not really saying that. I'm just saying this is how the is got inside of you. This is how the moral system got inside of you. And it's your perceptions of that morality that are going to guide your decisions and your choices. It's not real. I guess I'm not a moral realist. Is that what it's sounding like?
Yeah, I mean, I don't.
Yeah, I'm not a sophisticated moral philosopher or anything. It's just, I just think you get a moral system inside of you and you follow it from one degree or another. Is that system, does that reflect a reality that's outside of you or that's not you?
Simon's been trying to get a moral
really
system inside of him for a long time.
I've had
namely
it in
yours.
me.
Ooh, I got one that might be. It might be a little.
Can I just say hello to John and check your mic?
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Hey,
Yay!
John. Great to have you.
My laptop wasn't working, so I just used the iPhone. So now it's going well.
Is it all right to call you by your previous pseudonym?
If you guys prefer my previous pseudonym, go for it.
I thought it was the best. So there we go. Anyway, thank you, John. Would you like to just pontificate on?
Wait, before John does, I have a question to ask John.
Go ahead.
Sure.
Is your bed made?
Of course it is.
Good. Then you can argue on the internet. Go ahead.
Nice. This is, by the way, since it's been a while since we've all spoken, guess I might want to get you guys caught up on something interesting. I'm engaged to be married, and the date is January 20th. So there you are.
Well, depending on how it turns out, congratulations, or I'm sorry. I'm just
kidding. No. I was going to do almost the same joke. Congratulations, and I'm sorry.
Yeah, congratulations. I'm just jesting. I'm joking.
Well,
I wish you happy times.
Well,
who's lucky fella?
Oh, thank you. I'll say this much: every other woman on the face of the earth is now happy. I won't be grasping at them.
Yeah,
one took one. I found one lucky girl who was willing to take one for the team.
Yeah, that's what you tell her. You tell her that you should walk around demanding thanks from other women because she has protected them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But no, seriously, she's a peach, and I'm really blessed to have her. And
awesome.
Yeah. But so I'm guessing you guys are discussing the nature of morality.
Indeed. Yeah.
All right. I guess my 2 cents would just be that moral claims are claims that are largely grounded in human nature, just the way we are. And moral claims are a kind of hypothetical imperative. So people usually see norms as being something you just ought to do in and of themselves. And if you don't do it, then you're irrational. But I don't think that's the case. I think moral norms just stem from the fact that we have this ability to empathize with the happiness of others. And we realize that in tracking their happiness, it's no different from our own. And because that's the case, we have this motivation to will their happiness in the same way we will our own happiness. And I don't think that that's something, and I think generally this is how we track truths of other people's mental dispositions to anything else. You could track, for example, without the person saying it, whether or not they're hungry, if they're feeling distant or depressed. You can grasp that element of it. You're not kind of stuck to the fact that they're, some sort of highly evolved robot sometimes highly developed robots. Sometimes maybe if it gets so good, we won't tell the difference. But generally, this faculty of empathy helps us out to track how other people feel. And if I don't really have a reason to say their happiness is any different from mine, I don't see a reason why I shouldn't will their happiness as my happiness. And if someone doesn't want to will their happiness, then I don't really see any good reason they have not to. Like, what's so special about it? Is it because it's mine? Well, all I'm saying at that point is I will my own happiness because I just will my own happiness. It's not really that informative. It's very tautological. But if they say, oh, he's of a different race than I am, well, I mean, I don't see how race really affects how another person is happy, or that he's happy in a different way than you are.
Well, I think people will argue with races that, that he'll be happier with his own kind, or she'll be happier with her own kind.
Then at that point, that's an empirical claim to a rule, and we could actually investigate that.
Yeah, I've heard those kinds of arguments in the Deep South since I was a boy, so that's how they usually generate them.
I mean, if it's true that people will be happy living among their own race, then comparative to people living with non-members of their own race, then I say we go for it. But I haven't really seen good reason or evidence to suggest that. I think some people can generally be happy with people who aren't of their own race.
Yeah, it depends. In that particular case, it depends on your access to your imagination, your access to be able to the resources to be able to change your circumstances, all sorts of things. If you're not able to have a thick skin against the opinions of others, then maybe that's not the right choice for you. It doesn't provide any kind of when you think it through, any kind of objective, authoritative reality. I don't know the right words here. I'm not a moral philosopher, but anyway, I'm getting caught in the weeds, and it's your turn to talk.
No worries. So it does depend on the particular person too. You are right, but but there's a very different claim there. If you're saying, John, I'm an Arab. John would be happy living in an Arab society as opposed to a generally white society. That's a different claim from the average Arab, or Arabs would be happier living among Arabs. Like, as soon as you get to me, like, that's a more specific empirical claim. And in my case, it's false. But it still might be true that in general, Arabs will want to live with other Arabs. But that's actually why we create these moral norms. That's why we generally how we generally decide which moral rules we should follow. It all goes back to which ones safeguard the general welfare, the general happiness for everyone, as well as their freedom to pursue that happiness. Because everyone is kind of motivated by their own happiness. Like, even the most depressed person who doesn't really want to go outside the house or isn't even at all motivated, he refrains from doing any external actions, not because he doesn't want to be happy, but because he's so in despair that the only sort of happiness he could come up with is just laying on his couch or something like that. It comes from a mistake. He's still willing his own happiness in that way. And chances are he appreciates his own freedom well enough to just keep lying there on the couch. He would struggle to, if someone forced him off of it or do anything else, he values his freedom to try to pursue that happiness in his own way. So
that's the thing too, is a lot of conditions, and I'm sorry to interrupt, I apologize.
Oh no, go for it.
It just gives me the thought that, like depression, like a lot of other conditions that affect our moral choices, it's a thought disorder caused by a low amount of uptake of some chemical between the nerves of the brain, and we don't fully understand depression as it is anyway. In fact, we don't even understand some of the medicines that treat depression and treat it successfully. It's weird, but yeah, there's also a biochemical component to quote unquote immorality. That so when you're doing this great equation, this great algorithm of assessing morality in others, you have to think about that, because it is kind of a truth. And I think a lot of this, a lot of objective moral systems just conveniently leave out what we have learned is that morality or moral choices are also based on sets of conditions in our minds that we cannot help.
Right. So I think in those circumstances, there are distinctions between people who are moral agents and moral patients. I think at a certain point when there are so many mental issues that you're not able to actually process these rules or actually get into these moral agreements with other people to follow said rules, I think at that point you have outside yourself from the moral conversation, in which we're left with one of two things. Either you willfully decided not to do it, even though you have that capacity, in which case you've kind of foregone all the benefits and rights to even participate in that system, or you just couldn't be a member of that discussion in the first place, in which case I think we ought to treat you like a child, like someone who hasn't fully or could never fully develop those capacities. So that's always the important thing to keep in mind.
Or we could get them some Prozac.
The issue with actually making the statement that it is dependent on the happiness of the group and the individual. Take one moral system that I'm against. Their moral as the group agrees that forcibly taking a woman who is single allows you to actually take that person as your bride.
Right.
They see that as morally correct, and that is what the group foresees as correct. One person might find that morally abhorrent. Who is the wrong person in that situation? In the way that you're saying that the happiness of the group is more important based on the happiness of individuals within the group, then that system should be the right way to go, because the group has agreed that that's the way to go.
Right. So,
but the way that I foresee morals, it should be what is beneficial and what is detrimental.
Right.
And morals should follow what is most beneficial for everyone involved.
Right. So that's a good anti-utilitarian sort of argument. And utilitarians actually have a few good moves they can make here. So for example, one move that I really like is just to say that, in such a situation, the rules of happiness isn't going to just be something that is benefited on an act-by-act basis, but rather by rules in general. So for example, if an individual's freedom and happiness can be overridden because the general group of men are happier, well, you have to ask yourself something. Would your own happiness be something that you would also be willing to sacrifice if you were in that other person's situation? As a woman, a woman's happiness is qualitatively no different from a man's happiness. I don't really see what arbitrary distinction one can make there. And if that's the case, then I would have no other repercussion other than to treat my own happiness as the litmus for what rule she should accept. And I don't think someone can consistently deny their own happiness in that situation. Affirm their own happiness in that situation, being forcibly married against your will with the woman's. That's one move. Another move someone can take is that there is actually somebody who does the whole calculus for what makes people generally happy. And if you're a theist, you might want to do this. And there were in early English literature utilitarian theists. You guys know the watchmaker argument? I'm trying to remember the guy who postulated that. I think William Paley.
William Paley, yeah. I would remember the name of that guy 5 minutes after we end the stream.
William Paley was another example. So God himself could just say, if you have a religious code that says no forcible marriage against somebody's will, then no, then it doesn't really matter what how our own perception or calculus goes. There's someone who seems to know more facts about this matter, God, who could override that. And I guess someone could not just maybe not a Christian or a Muslim, but maybe some person of some religious persuasion could have that argument. I've actually seen Christian theologians argue from the Bible that forced marriages are not actually encouraged. However debatable that is, I'm not going to get into, but that's one way of going about it. But yeah, I think the first way is probably the best and less, or least controversial. It's that in order to put the woman in that situation, you have to somehow say her happiness, or women in general in that situation, you'd have to say a woman's happiness is less than that of a man, or different than a man, which it isn't. And being that as it may, women should, as a rule, should not be put in that situation, even if it makes men happier, or the general total of men happier. So there you go.
As much as I hate being on the opposing side of it, when it comes down to it, that's just a cop-out. Taking the first aspect of the happiness of the individual and the group is more important than just one individual's happiness. And now you're saying that now you have to take into account the happiness of an individual. That's speaking in circles, and it's why I hate philosophy.
Okay. So maybe I'm probably not being clear on this matter. I'm saying that it's not just an individual; it's women. I'm attacking the point that it's women who have to succumb to this rule in general. It's not just Maryland. Yeah, it's not just
your
Maryland.
Second point, but I'm talking in reference to your first point.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
It's basically just speaking in circles. That's why you need to be more objective when you're trying to define something that is so subjective.
Right. Well, I mean, I think the second point still stands, though. Women, there's no real qualitative difference between a man's happiness and a woman's happiness, and just put women in the position where they could be forcibly married seems to presume that somehow there's a greater increase in the total happiness when it's not the case. I think when it comes down to it, women wouldn't be happy, and men should just reconsider those rules in light of that.
Yeah, I wasn't going to mention the Bible or anything else like that, but I'm glad you guessed where that was from. But I'm not a Christian. I'm actually a Celt, but that's why the aspect of the idea of individual happiness is a alien thing for me, because I'm incapable of having it because I've got damage to 2 of the glands in my brain. I don't actually generate the correct neural pathways and the correct chemicals within the brain. So I don't actually follow the idea of happiness and unhappiness. I don't get those feelings. That's why when I look at morals, it has to be based on the idea of what is detrimental and what is beneficial.
Mm-hmm. So here's a question for you then. Let's say I give you 2 circumstances. One circumstance is you and me have a nice cold beer on a hot sunny day. The other circumstance is I torture you. Is your emotional output going to be the same in both of those circumstances, or are you psychologically going to feel different in those 2 scenarios?
My brain just said the first option cannot be because of the aspect of the medication that I'm on. The first one would kill me. The second one wouldn't make a difference because the sheer amount of pain that I live in. So to me, either option is unviable.
I see. So you have medication. When you take that medication, are you happier?
No, I don't actually experience anything along the lines of change in opinions. It's difficult to explain.
So, like, do you laugh at comedies on TV, or do you even bother with them?
I don't bother with them because I don't get any emotion out of it. In the same way, I don't bother with horror movies because I'm more critical about the way it is.
Well, what about like do you like any kind of drama or science fiction or anything like that?
again, I'm very critical when it comes up to science fiction. I analyze the
Yeah.
situation which they're put into, and again, I don't see any point to drama because I normally pick apart where people are going wrong.
Okay. How about this then?
I'm sorry, real quick. You would be
sorry,
the
go for it.
perfect guy to watch a movie with, because all that pesky emotionalism is pushed out of the way, and we can get your actual critical thoughts. That's pretty cool. But anyways, I'm sorry. Continue.
All right. So, do you have how about when you consider ideas? Like, don't you think that there are some ideas that you like reflecting on versus some ideas you would rather not reflect on?
No, to me, it's a matter of it's all information.
Mm-hmm. Do you do anything to pass the time? Like, do you have a preferred pastime?
Well, last year I finished my doctorate in geology, and
Okay.
next year I'll be starting for a basic degree in astrophysics.
Okay. Out of curiosity, why go into geology as opposed to, I don't know, English?
It was available.
Ah, how about, all right, how about geology
Yeah,
over mathematics?
I'd already done mathematics. That's why I'm going into astrophysics next year.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? I didn't hear you.
I've been in this situation for 17 years, so I've already done a basic course of mathematics and physics. That's why I'm now going into astrophysics next year.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
Hmm.
I think we bottomed out a little bit on that one. Like, I don't want to keep probing him.
Yeah.
No, fair enough. But I think you have fair enough. I won't go into any. I won't ask any more questions. But I think you present a very
fascinating.
interesting. But I do think you present a very interesting case because there's no happiness there. Then what exactly is there to empathize with? And if I don't really have anything to empathize with, well, like, what is there to? Why should I treat you as a moral agent? Like, that's the question that's bugging me right now.
That's why you should look at things. What is detrimental and what is beneficial?
Right. But detriment and benefit, those are values. Like, they presume something of a preference.
Not necessarily. If you look at it in a biological aspect, that's another way of putting it, because you can actually define biological benefit and you can look at biological detriment.
Right. So let me just give you an example then. In terms of biology, something that's been great for cows, for example, is the fact that they've been domesticated, and that allowed them to survive compared to the extinction process that really haunted a lot of wild animals. But at the same time, um, is survival really the only way of? If survival is really the only way of kind of gauging that, don't we have issues with like quality of life? And doesn't it just and if that's the case, doesn't reducing everything to survival kind of ignore all those things?
No, when you come down to it, the domestication is actually detrimental, because domestication is the choice made for something against its own life.
Okay, so why is the autonomy of a cow something that's a benefit as opposed to a detriment?
It's not only just the autonomy of it. If you are forcibly choosing the path of something's future, you're
Mm-hmm.
taking away the aspect of what the future of that individual or that group could be. That is a detriment towards both the individual and as the whole of what you're changing it towards, regardless of whether it's a bovidae or any other animal.
Yeah, but a potential future could be better, or it could even be worse. In fact,
But do we have the right to make that choice for them?
Yeah, but that leads back to the question of what rights do they have to begin with?
It's not a matter of what rights do they have. It's a matter of, is it something that's beneficial or is it detrimental towards our own, towards creating a selfish choice? No.
I think. I mean, I think at that point you're kind of doing the complaint. You're kind of lodging the same sort of complaint you lodged against philosophy in general earlier, In this specific scenario, now where you're starting to defend rights again with benefits and detriments, but if your original question was, what right do we have over it? That presumes, at least as I understand the question, that we require a right to do so.
Okay, I'll put it into a biological question which was going in my head. The exact question that was going into my head is, you're messing with the genetic makeup of an individual and shrinking its genetic capabilities.
Okay.
By doing that, the aspects of modifying some group's genetic potential is detrimental to the possibilities that is available to its gene pool. How is that a beneficial aspect? That is what the question was going into my head, and I tried to shrink it.
Okay. I mean, isn't it beneficial because by domesticating them and by providing and making them dependent on creatures who themselves dependent on their survival is guaranteed, as opposed to being put into the hands of anarchy or nature, which doesn't really care one way or another whether they live or die.
But the larger gene pool allows for greater potential and greater variation, and it also allows them for a greater chance of more things in the future. That's why it would be more beneficial to have greater options rather than greater safety.
But it also allows for extinction too.
That's a possibility for everything.
Yeah, but but nature, it's far more guaranteed than under the hands of human beings.
Is it?
Compare the number of domestic species that went extinct versus the number that are in nature. I'd be willing to bet good money that there have been more wild animals that have gone extinct than domesticated ones.
Over a period of time, or are you talking about all periods of time?
I'll do you one as in the period of time where human beings started domesticating animals.
If we take out, the unfortunate thing is you need to take into account what has gone extinct due to human intervention as well. You need to take that out to make it fair by saying, because your statement was nature is the one that's cruel. In fact, the majority of species that have actually gone extinct is due to the aspect of human intervention.
Right, but human beings are just as much a part of nature as any other species. If you're more prone to go extinct because you weren't domesticated by humans, as opposed to being domesticated by humans, well, that just shows you one of the dangers of being wild. You stand to be put extinct by human beings.
So stupidity comes into it then?
Yeah, basically, human beings are stupid. We have that possibility with us as well. But to be fair, out of all the animals that exist, I think human beings are stupid. I think we are the least stupid.
As an individual, we are quite intelligent in most cases, but as a whole, we are actually quite stupid for the way that we behave, as we can actually foresee.
Yeah, there is a mob mentality aspect to it as well. Sometimes when human beings are pitted against each other, they'll prefer short-term advantages over long-term benefits. Basically, some people have long-term time preference, other people have short-term time preference. So that is something we have to battle as a whole. And we also have to battle the anticipation of other human beings preferring short-term time preference. So we just reject our long-term time preference in hopes of also getting something in the short term. It's quite crazy how human behavior works.
Yes, it's just the fact that the whole seems to be more preferential towards the short term. And that's why when you actually take the analysis of which is more cruel, nature or domestication, you need to take out the account of the majority of extinctions within the last 20,000 years in the duration of the domestication period. It would actually have to be domestication has probably had more species go extinct due to the domestication process, then nature has actually excluded the natural occurrence of it. And I think we need to tone it down because they want to call it quit soon.
Actually, there have been some species that have arguably been capable of being preserved better because of domestication. So, for example, there have been animal sanctuaries where elephants were able to be preserved and live longer lives because they have controlled hunting, which, while at the same time being able to at the same time there are elephants that die, there are other elephants that more elephants get to live, repopulate, and go on, and they're also protected from poachers who have an inherent desire to kill these elephants to begin with for their ivory. So,
Yep.
yeah.
That's a great little point there. There's a lovely sketch by Mitchell and Webb that basically say, well, look, there'd be a lot more tigers around if we ate tigers.
I know the one you're talking about. Yeah, that's quite funny.
Cats is the one they say, but yeah, or polar bears, I think they say. But yeah, and that is got to be true, right? Because we have a self-interest to keep cows and dogs, and that's why they proliferate in such large numbers. Whereas wild animals seem to be going extinct at an ever-increasing rate. But there we go. And that brings us back to what's moral then? Is it moral to keep the species alive, or is it moral to keep them in the wild? We don't know, and again goes back to the point of subjectivity. But I'd like to pass it back to you, Xbox, to just kind of, I guess, if you wouldn't mind, Xbox, like tell us which is the right moral theory. Now we've spoken about it.
Well, out of all the ones you spoke about, you didn't speak about mine, so you didn't get to the right moral theory. But
that was wrong of me. I'm sorry.
That's right. You're learning. But we did scratch the surface of a few of them, and I think we had some good conversation out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And John, when we kick off here, since you're on your phone, will you stay on if you can?
Of course.
And it was great meeting you, BMC.
I bring an interesting viewpoint to it because of the different biochemistry within my head.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't know how similar we are, just without the injury.
Yeah, I think in terms of you're a very interesting case, Vincent. I think probably the best answer I have on the fly right now is, well, I can't really empathize with your happiness. Your freedom is no quantitatively different than my own, and if I'm committed to other people's freedoms as well as my own freedom, I have to be committed to yours too. So at the very least, there's that.
That's why I approach things again as the detrimental or beneficial. That's the only way I can approach things.
Fair enough.
Okay, fantastic. It's nice to have a bit of an agreement at the end of a discussion like this as well. Okay, I'd just like to do a bit of a wrap up, and then we'll play a quick outro, and then we'll go offline, and then we'll just carry on the conversation for a little while, if you guys wouldn't mind. So basically, I just want to firstly thank everybody that's been on. So now I've got to try and get through. Gus, of course, thank you, Gus, for stopping right early on and getting the conversation going. We would ever be at a loss without you. Pseudo or Headless, of course. The great Maute, thank you also for coming on and moving us on in the conversation. Serb for some interesting positions and posing us some moral dilemmas, which always we're thankful for. Scott, first time on the channel for Scott, one of my favourite people online. Beamsy, with a name like Beamsy, we gotta love you. No, thank you for coming on. One of a brilliant perspective, as always. Brilliant man. John, really good to see you again after this length of time. I wish we could have got together when you were in the UK, but not to worry. Congratulations to you on your upcoming nuptials. I think you'll be a wonderful husband. And Jefferson Spatchcock, of course, not to say, he's a man. He knows a lot, and we love having him on. 3 things I like about him. So there we go. Thank you very much, everybody. I'm just going to play us out with a bit of a bit of branding, of course, because that's what we do. And yeah, we'll see everybody next week. So it's good night from myself and good night from Xbox. Xbox, good night.
Yeah. Yeah. Have a good night.
Yeah, we'll see everybody next week with another interesting topic. And thanks to the chat as well. Thanks, Lucky. Hey, thanks, Kevin. Appreciate it.